Hey everyone, welcome back to Fluent Vibes Podcast, your daily English practice podcast. I'm Amy.
And I'm Sam. Thanks for being here today. If you're new, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our daily episodes. We post a brand new conversation on books, life lessons, English tips, and many more every single day so that you may improve your English. Imagine for a second that you are just walking down the street, right? Like just minding your own business.
Yeah, just a totally normal day.
Exactly, a normal day. And suddenly, someone throws a baseball directly at your face.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right, so what happens? You don't, freeze and analyze the trajectory of the ball.
Right, you don't do the math.
No, you don't translate the visual data of this, fast-moving spherical object into the concept of danger. And you certainly don't consciously execute a command to your muscles to duck.
You'd be hit by the ball if you did all that.
Exactly. You don't do any of that. You just duck. It's instantaneous.
It's completely filtered, yeah. Just a direct reaction to your environment.
Right. But if you're an adult learning a new language and someone just walks up to you on the street and simply asks, "How are you?" in English.
Oh, yeah. Everything stops.
It does. Your brain suddenly turns into this massive bureaucratic
literal nightmare. Yeah.
You hear the words, you pause, and then you have to route them through this internal translation department.
Which takes time.
A lot of time. You're rummaging around for the correct response, you check it for errors, and then finally you speak.
And it is agonizingly slow.
So slow. And, if you were exhausted after a 10-minute conversation in English, I want to be clear, it is not because you lack intelligence.
Yeah, not at all.
And it's probably not even because you lack vocabulary. It's because your brain is basically doing twice the computational work of a native speaker.
It is a massive cognitive tax, just massive.
Yeah, tax.
And it's a tax that, honestly, most learners just accept as this unavoidable part of the process, which is completely exhausting.
Exactly. And, well, that is exactly why we are here today. We are going on a deep dive, specifically designed to hack that exact system.
SAR.
So, if you're listening to this, you likely already know the vocabulary, the grammar rules, but you are still stuck paying that cognitive tax every single time you speak.
Right. The latency is still there.
Right. So our source material today is incredibly concentrated. It's really brief.
It's essentially just an excerpt.
Yeah, a highly focused text titled Mastering the Internal Monologue, Thinking in English. And we're zeroing in on one really specific section of that text.
A major pivot point in the document.
Yep, it's titled How to Start Thinking in English, all caps.
It's a short text, but the implications of it are staggering.
Really? How so?
Well, it is fundamentally asking the learner to completely reorganize their neurobiology.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because that sounds huge.
It is.
We're going to explore exactly how you can train your brain to think directly in English, bypassing that internal translation department entirely.
Getting rid of the bureaucracy.
Getting rid of it. We want to get you to the point where English feels like ducking that baseball.
Instantaneous.
Instantaneous and natural. So, looking at the very premise of our source text today, I have to ask you, why does this author frame language acquisition entirely around this idea of an internal monologue?
It's a great question.
Because, why aren't we talking about flashcards or speaking exercises or immersion tactics? That's what you usually hear.
Right. What's fascinating here is that the source is basically bypassing all the symptoms of language and going straight to the control room.
The control room.
Yeah, in cognitive science, there is this concept known as subvocalization.
The vocalization.
Yes, and this is the silent speech that you produce in your head when you read, when you write, and most importantly, when you think.
Okay, so it's that voice I hear in my head right now as I figure out what I'm going to say to you next.
Precisely. It's the narrator of your life.
Right.
And for a language learner, that subvocalization is almost always happening in their native tongue.
Oh, sure. Of course it is.
But traditional language learning, the flashcards, the grammar drills, the rote repetitions.
The stuff we all did in high school.
Exactly. All of that is mostly focused on external mechanics, how you move your mouth, what words you write down.
Right.
But if your subvocalization, your internal engine, so to speak, is running on the fuel of your native language, then every single English word you produce externally is essentially a counterfeit.
A counterfeit? Wow.
Yeah, because it was manufactured in one language and then painted to look like another.
Oh, man. Okay, I see where this is going. If the engine is native, the output is always going to have a slight delay.
A delay and a slight unnaturalness to it.
Yeah.
The source title, Mastering the Internal Monologue, It posits that until you address the literal language of your subvocalization, all of your external practice is just a superficial layer.
Like putting a Band-Aid on it.
Right. You are basically treating the exhaust instead of rebuilding the engine.
That makes so much sense. And that actually brings us to the first, really, I think, provocative word in the source material.
The word mastering.
Yes, mastering. It doesn't say, practicing the internal monologue.
Or improving it.
Right. It doesn't say improving. It uses the word mastering. And in a cognitive context, what does mastery actually mean here? Because, frankly, it sounds incredibly intense.
Well, it is intense because it requires a really fundamental shift in how we view our own thoughts.
Okay, how so?
Most of us view our internal monologue as this totally passive phenomenon. Like, we think our thoughts just happen to us.
Right, like they just bubble up.
Exactly. Bubbling up from the subconscious, already fully formed in our native language, we generally don't feel like we have any agency over the language of our private thoughts.
Right. I mean, if I stub my toe in the middle of the night, I don't consciously choose the language I use to silently curse in my head.
No, you don't.
It just happens. It's automatic.
Exactly. But the word mastering implies that your inner voice is actually an instrument. It implies deliberate, conscious control. In neurobiological terms, we are talking about neuroplasticity.
Ah, okay. The brain's ability to rewire itself.
Rewire, exactly. Reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. Now, think about your native language. It has had decades to carve these deep, massive superhighways in your brain.
Oh, yeah. Paved, multi-lane highways.
Right. Your thoughts travel down those highways with absolutely zero friction. So, mastering a new internal monologue means you have to deliberately force your thoughts off that superhighway.
Oh, that sounds hard.
It is. You have to make them bushwhack through the dense jungle of a completely new language.
Okay, see, I have to push back here for a second.
Sure.
Because you're talking about forcing thoughts off a superhighway and bushwhacking. You're talking about mastering the narrator of our lives.
Yes.
Isn't that an incredibly adversarial way to treat your own mind?
That's a fair point.
I mean, it sounds like we're telling the listener they have to, tame a wild horse inside their head. Exhausting and, frankly, unsustainable.
That is a very fair critique. And honestly, the wild horse analogy is exactly the trap that many learners fall into.
They try to fight it.
Right. They try to forcefully suppress their native language. And when it inevitably slips back in, which it will, they get frustrated and they just quit.
Because it's too much effort.
Yes. But true cognitive mastery in this context isn't about violent suppression. It is much more akin to tuning a radio dial.
Tuning a radio dial. Okay.
How so? So think about the underlying mechanism of Hebbian learning in the brain. The core principle is neurons that fire together wire together.
Right, the classic neuroscience rule.
Exactly. So right now, the frequency of your native language is this massive high-power broadcasting tower right next door.
It's blasting.
It's booming. The English frequency, on the other hand, is this faint, crackly station a little further down the dial.
Barely picking it up.
Right. So mastery isn't about blowing up the native language tower. You can't do that.
It's always going to be there.
It's always going to be there. Mastery is the gentle, continuous, conscious act of recognizing when the static of your native language bleeds over.
Which happens a lot.
Constantly. And then keeping your hand on the dial and gently tuning it back to the English frequency.
Okay, I like that better. A lot better. So it's not a fight to the death with my own subconscious.
No, not at all.
But, if the native language is constantly bleeding over, what physically happens in the brain when we try to force an English word over a native concept?
What do you mean?
Because if I tune the dial to English, the signal is weak, like you said. How do we actually strengthen that signal so it can compete with the native superhighway?
Okay. That requires us to look at how words are actually mapped in your brain.
Mapped.
Yeah. And this is where the concept of the internal monologue gets really profound, because we essentially have two different types of mapping. Lexical mapping and semantic mapping.
Lexical and semantic. Break those down for me.
Let's use a really simple example. Think of a dog.
Okay. Got a dog in my head.
In your native language, the word for dog is semantically mapped.
Semantically mapped.
Yes. It is connected directly to the sensory concept of a dog. The smell of wet fur, the sound of barking, maybe the emotional memory of a childhood pet.
Right, it's a package of experiences.
Exactly. The word is deeply tethered to the actual reality of the object. That is semantic mapping.
Right. I hear the word, and my brain instantly lights up with all the concepts associated with it.
Exactly. But when you learn a second language as an adult, you usually rely on lexical mapping.
Which is different.
Very. You don't connect the English word dog to the smell of wet fur. You connect the English word dog to your native word for dog.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the English word is just tethered to my native vocabulary, not to the actual real-world concept.
Yes. Your native language acts as this mandatory middleman.
A middleman.
So when you try to use your internal monologue in English, it feels hollow. It feels weak.
Because it doesn't have the roots.
Exactly. The English words don't have those deep emotional sensory roots yet.
That makes so much sense.
The reason the source emphasizes thinking in English so heavily is because the only way to build semantic mapping,
To get the wet fur and the barking.
right, to connect the English word directly to the reality, is to use English to interpret your raw environment before your native language has a chance to step in.
Wow. You know, this connects deeply to a massive pain point I hear from learners all the time.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
They say, I feel like I lose my personality when I speak English. Like I'm not funny, I'm not nuanced, I sound like a robot.
It's a very common complaint.
And if our internal monologue is deeply tied to our spontaneous thoughts, our private jokes, our emotional reactions,
It is.
then isn't that monologue deeply tied to our actual identity?
It is inextricably linked to your sense of self. Absolutely.
So if we are telling the listener to tune the dial to English, to change the language of their internal monologue, aren't we essentially asking them to adopt an entirely new internal persona?
Yes. And honestly, we shouldn't sugarcoat how uncomfortable that is.
It sounds super uncomfortable.
It is essentially like installing a co-pilot in your brain.
A co-pilot. I like that analogy.
Think about it. When you first begin this process, it feels like an intrusion. You have your native language voice, or
Seasoned pilot.
the seasoned pilot, who knows you intimately, who holds all your memories and your specific, nuanced sense of humor.
Right.
And then you deliberately force this new, clunky, less articulate, Englished co-pilot to take the controls of your internal monologue.
And the original pilot is sitting right there going, what are you doing? I can fly this plane much faster and smoother. Just let me do it.
Exactly. Why are you struggling to describe a coffee cup in English when I have 10 poetic ways to describe it in our native language?
That is exactly what it feels like.
The native language pilot is efficient. It is comfortable. The English co-pilot makes mistakes. It operates incredibly slowly, and it lacks sophistication.
So you feel kind of dumb.
You do.
Yeah.
It requires immense psychological resilience to accept a temporary downgrading of your internal intelligence.
A temporary downgrading.
Yes, but here is the critical insight that the source text implies. If you never let the co-pilot fly the plane in the quiet moments of your own mind,
They'll never get better.
they will never become a master pilot. You have to endure that period where your internal identity feels slightly altered, slightly less you, in order to build those direct semantic maps we talked about.
Okay, so we've established that the internal monologue is the engine, right? And that mastering it means gently but firmly keeping the dial tuned to the English co-pilot, despite how frustrating it is.
Correct.
This actually brings us to the core focus of this deep dive, the real meat of the source text's subtitle. Actually thinking in English and escaping what we can call the translation trap.
The translation trap. It is the silent killer of fluency.
Let's really dissect this, because I want you, the listener, to understand exactly why your brain feels like it's melting after a long English conversation.
It's exhausting.
You mentioned earlier that translating requires twice the computational work. Can we map out exactly what is happening in the brain when a learner translates a conversation in real time?
Let's break down the mechanics of it. Linguists refer to this as lexical retrieval latency, but we can just call it the 6-step bureaucratic nightmare.
6 steps. Okay, walk me through it.
Imagine you are at a networking event and someone asks you a relatively simple question in English.
Like, what did you think of the presentation?
Perfect. What did you think of the presentation? Here's what happens in the translating brain. Step 1, auditory processing. You receive the English sounds.
Okay, step 1.
Step 2, decoding. Your brain translates that English question into your native language so you can fully understand it on a semantic level.
Right.
Step 3, formulation. Your internal monologue, your native pilot, formulates the nuanced, intelligent answer in your native language.
Okay, we are 3 steps in, and we haven't even begun to respond yet.
Exactly. You haven't spoken a word. Step 4, fetching. You now have to go into your mental dictionary and fetch the English vocabulary equivalents for your native response.
Looking up the words.
Step 5, assembly and grammar checking. You take those English words and try to arrange them using English syntax rules, making sure you didn't accidentally use your native language's grammar structure.
Which is so easy to do.
It is. And finally, step 6, phonological output. You actually speak the words.
6 complex, computationally heavy steps for a single sentence.
And you are doing this in milliseconds.
Oh, man.
You are doing this while maintaining eye contact, while reading the other person's body language, while trying to suppress the anxiety of making a mistake.
Right.
It is an extraordinary recipe for cognitive overload. The buffer in your brain simply fills up.
That perfectly explains that glazed over look. You know, when you're talking to a learner and the topic shifts suddenly or someone tells a joke and you literally see them freeze.
Their processing queue is jammed. They are still on step 3 of the previous sentence while the conversation has moved on.
Let's put an analogy on this to make it crystal clear.
Yeah.
I used to think of translating in your head like, you know, driving with the parking brake on.
Right.
Lots of smoke, lots of effort, moving very slowly. But based on what you just said about the 6 steps, it's actually worse than that.
Oh, it's much worse.
Translating is like trying to fly from New York to Los Angeles, but having a mandatory 3-hour layover in your hometown every single time you travel.
The hometown layover. That is a brilliant way to frame it.
Right. Because you are taking the information, the flight, and instead of going directly from point A to point B, you are forcing it to route all the way back to your native language hub.
Which is way out of the way.
You sit around the terminal while it gets processed, and then board a connecting flight to the actual English destination. It is incredibly inefficient.
And thinking in English, as the source demands, is the act of finally booking the direct flight.
Bypassing the layover.
Exactly. It is bypassing the hometown layover entirely. You go from step 1, hearing the English, directly to step 3, formulating the response in English, and then step 6, speaking. You completely eliminate the latency.
But, you know, the layover analogy also highlights another huge problem, right?
Yeah.
When you route everything through your hometown, you pick up hometown habits.
Absolutely.
What happens to the actual structure of your English when you translate?
You experience what linguists call syntactic interference.
Syntactic interference.
Yes. Every language has its own unique architecture, its own idioms, its own way of conceptualizing time, space, and relationships.
Yeah.
When you translate from your native language, you are usually performing a literal translation. You are taking the structural blueprint of your native language and just plugging English vocabulary into it.
So it's like you're building a house using Japanese or Spanish or German blueprints, but using English bricks.
That's exactly it. And the result is a house that might technically stand up.
It's grammatically correct, maybe.
It might be grammatically coherent, but it looks incredibly strange to a native speaker. The phrasing is clunky, it feels unnatural.
Like, why is the door in the ceiling?
Exactly. When you bypass the translation trap and think directly in English, you aren't just speeding up your response time, you are actually adopting the structural rhythms of the language.
You're using the English blueprints.
Yes. You start conceptualizing the thought in the shape of English, rather than cramming English into the shape of your native tongue.
Okay, I have to push back here again. On behalf of the learner who is listening right now and feeling a bit defensive.
Go for it.
Because we are making translation sound like this terrible, toxic habit. But let's be realistic here. For a day one beginner, or even an intermediate learner, isn't translation the only way to map new words to concepts they already understand?
Wow.
If I don't know the English word for democracy, I have to use my native language to understand the definition. Are we asking learners to run before they can walk? How do you conceptualize an abstract thought without translation if you just don't have the vocabulary yet?
That is the most crucial distinction we can make today. You are absolutely right about the initial acquisition phase.
Okay, cute.
When you are first exposed to a new concept or a complex vocabulary word, translation is a necessary scaffold. Your brain has to use the existing native architecture to comprehend the new data.
Okay, so translation isn't entirely evil.
Not during the encoding phase.
The encoding phase.
Right. But here's where the source text draws a hard line. The source doesn't say how to encode vocabulary. It says how to start thinking in English. The problem isn't using translation to learn a word on day 1. The problem is relying on translation to deploy that word on day 100.
Encoding versus deploying. That's a huge difference.
Exactly. Many learners build the scaffold to understand the new word, but they never take the scaffold down. They leave the hometown layover in place permanently.
They just get used to the layover.
The text implies that the transition from translating to thinking directly doesn't just happen naturally. You don't just passively grow out of the translation phase. You have to actively intervene. You have to force the direct connection.
Which brings us to the most actionable and frankly the most intimidating part of our source text. It is a capitalized header. How to start thinking in English.
The emphasis must be placed squarely on the word start. This isn't just a philosophical text, it's an initiation.
Right, and starting is always the hardest part. Going from 0 to 1 is infinitely harder than going from 1 to 10.
Always.
But given everything we just talked about, the deep neurological pathways of the native language, the 6-step bureaucratic nightmare, the comfort of the hometown layover, why is starting this specific cognitive habit so uniquely difficult?
Because you are fighting against the fundamental nature of the human brain.
Fighting the brain.
Yes. The brain is, above all else, an efficiency machine. Its primary goal is to conserve caloric energy.
Right. Keep us alive.
And as we established, thinking in a new language, carving those new neural pathways, relying on a weak semantic map, burns an immense amount of cognitive calories.
So your brain is literally trying to stop you from doing this.
It will actively resist. It will throw up roadblocks. It will make you feel suddenly very tired. It will give you brain fog. It will distract you.
Oh, I felt that. The sudden urge to check your phone.
Exactly. And it will try to convince you that just translating this one sentence is so much easier and safer.
Just this one time.
Right. The friction of the start is the friction of forcing your brain to do high-calorie work when a low-calorie alternative, your native language, is sitting right there.
So how do we outsmart our own brains? The source text leaves the actual methods as an open doorway, right? It gives us the header, how to start, but we really have to extrapolate the journey based on the cognitive science.
We do.
So what is the required mindset to actually cross that threshold without retreating?
If we go back to the idea of the co-pilot, the necessary mindset is one of radical self-permission and vulnerability.
Vulnerability.
Yes. You have to give yourself permission to undergo what we discussed earlier, a temporary ego death.
Let's linger on this, because I think this is where 90% of language learners give up.
It's the biggest hurdle.
The vulnerability. When you decide to start thinking directly in English, your thoughts are going to be extremely basic.
Very basic.
Let's say you are a 40-year-old professional. In your native language, you are a complex adult. You ponder the nuances of geopolitics. You analyze the emotional subtext of a movie you just watched. You navigate complex social dynamics at work.
You operate at a very high level of abstraction.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are an intellectual powerhouse in your own mind. And then you try to switch your internal monologue to English.
And it all falls apart.
Exactly. And because you are bypassing translation, because you are refusing to use the native language scaffold, you don't have the vocabulary to think about geopolitics directly in English yet.
No, you don't.
Suddenly you go from being this complex philosopher to literally thinking, the apple is red, the car is fast, I am walking to the store, the water is cold.
It feels like an intellectual regression.
It is a massive blow to the ego. You sound like a toddler in your own head. So how does a learner navigate the sheer frustration of this initial start phase?
It's tough.
How do they stop themselves from saying, forget this, I'm going back to my intelligent native language translation because I refuse to feel stupid in my own head?
Well, consider how children acquire their first language. What is their relationship with failure?
They don't have one.
Exactly. If a toddler points at a cow and says doggy, and the parent corrects them, the toddler doesn't feel profound shame.
They don't have a crisis of identity.
They just accept the new data and keep moving. Adults, however, are paralyzed by the fear of looking, or in this case, feeling incompetent.
We hate feeling incompetent.
To navigate the frustration of the start phase, you have to adopt the psychological flexibility of a child while maintaining the rigorous discipline of an adult.
Flexibility of a child, discipline of an adult. I like that.
You have to intellectually understand that thinking the apple is red is not a regression of your intelligence. It is the necessary foundation of a new cognitive structure.
The foundation.
Think of it like building a cathedral. You cannot build the stained glass windows and the vaulted ceilings first.
You need a base.
You have to start by laying a very simple, very basic, very boring row of bricks on the ground. The apple is red is a brick.
You have to embrace the simplicity.
You must. If you demand complex philosophical English thoughts from your co-pilot on day one, the cognitive load will be too high, your brain will reject it, the hometown layover will reopen, and you will retreat to translation.
You'll default to the easy way.
The start is about volume and consistency, not complexity.
Okay, so let's make this incredibly practical for the listener. Let's design the start based on this science. Tomorrow morning, the goal is not to wake up and internally debate the merits of existentialism in flawless English.
Please don't try to do that. You will exhaust yourself before you even get out of bed.
Right. The goal is simply the act of flipping the switch. It's choosing to claim that very first mental real estate of the day.
The very first moment.
So you wake up, you open your eyes, before your native language has a chance to boot up its superhighway, you look at the ceiling and you force the English co-pilot to take the wheel. You think, I am awake, it is morning. In English.
It feels absurdly simple, but biologically what you are doing is profound. You are initiating a Hebbian learning sequence.
You're firing the English neurons first.
Yes. And then, as you get out of bed and walk to the kitchen, you use your physical environment as a tool to bypass translation.
How so? Like practically?
By narrating your physical actions directly. As your hand touches the cold handle of the refrigerator, you don't think the native word for cold.
You block it.
You force the internal voice to say cold. You are taking the physical sensory input, the feeling of the metal, and mapping it directly to the English word.
Building the semantic map.
You are bypassing the native language middleman and building semantic mapping in real time. Door opens, milk, cup, pour.
But wait, the static is going to come back, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm going to be making my coffee thinking cup, pour, and suddenly my brain is going to jump in with a complex native language thought about an email I have to send later.
Oh, definitely.
The native radio station is going to bleed over.
It is guaranteed to bleed over, and this is the critical moment.
Okay.
When you catch when you catch your native language slipping back in, you do not get angry. You do not beat yourself up.
Because it's not a wild horse.
Exactly. You just gently reach out, recognize that the dial has slipped, and you tune it back to the English frequency. You look down at the coffee and think, hot, dark, drink.
That gentle, relentless tuning. That is the mastery the source text is talking about.
It is.
It's not a finish line. The phrase, how to start, implies that starting isn't a one-time event that you do on a Tuesday and then you're done forever.
No.
You have to start hundreds of times a day. Every single time you lose the frequency, you start again.
Yes. Consistency over complexity. Every time you successfully link a sensory experience directly to an English word in your internal monologue, you are laying a brick.
A single brick.
You do that 1,000 times and suddenly you have a wall. You do it 10,000 times and suddenly the co-pilot can fly the plane through a storm.
That's amazing.
The latency drops, the translation trap dissolves, the English words start to carry their own emotional and sensory weight.
You know, breaking it down like this, exploring the neurobiology and the psychology behind it, this tiny concentrated piece of source material really does hold the blueprint for a complete cognitive overhaul.
It really shifts language acquisition from being an academic subject that you study externally to an environment that you inhabit internally.
That's a great way to put it.
It is the difference between reading a book about swimming and actually getting in the water.
So let's synthesize this deep dive for the listener. What have we actually uncovered about how to train the brain to think directly in English?
Well, first, we dismantled the idea of the internal monologue as a passive receiver.
Right. Subvocalization is an active biological process, and mastering it means treating it like an instrument.
You have to actively choose to tune the radio dial away from the overpowering signal of your native language and toward the faint signal of English.
And secondly, we identified the literal mechanics of the translation trap.
The 6-step nightmare.
We saw how routing every thought through the native language, the mandatory hometown layover, creates massive cognitive latency and syntactic interference.
The goal of thinking in English is to book the direct flight, moving from sensory input or auditory reception directly to English formulation.
And finally, we unpack the psychology of the start phase, the vital importance of giving yourself permission to undergo a temporary ego death.
To accept that your English thoughts will be basic, simple, and childish at first.
And to understand that this simplicity is not a failure, but the necessary structural foundation for semantic mapping. You have to narrate the physical world around you. Cup, cold, walk, to sever the native language middleman.
And if you can maintain that gentle discipline, if you can continuously tune the dial back to English without frustration, the complexity will naturally follow as those neural pathways thicken and strengthen.
This has been an incredibly enlightening way to look at something that feels so invisible and intangible. But as always on this show, before we go, we like to leave you with something to chew on.
Something to think about.
Something that builds on the science we've discussed today and takes it just a little bit further into the philosophical realm.
We've spent this entire hour talking about training your internal monologue to think directly in English, viewing it essentially as a mechanical tool to achieve better fluency and lower cognitive load.
Right, a very practical tool.
But as you continue this journey, and as you actually achieve this mastery, consider the theory of linguistic relativity, sometimes known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
Oh, I love this, where language shapes reality.
Exactly. The theory suggests that the structure of a language doesn't just describe our reality, it actively shapes how we perceive it.
How so?
Well, different languages categorize emotions, organize concepts of time, and frame physical space in entirely different ways.
Give me an example.
For example, some languages assign gender to inanimate objects, which subtly alters how speakers perceive those objects. Some languages don't have distinct words for certain colors, which actually affects how speakers visually distinguish them.
Right. So the language is the lens through which you see the world.
So, here is the provocative thought for the listener.
Get us.
If you successfully follow the blueprint we laid out today, if you endure the friction, tune the dial, and build a robust, dominant English internal monologue, how will your actual thoughts change?
Wow.
How will your personality shift? If English forces you to structure your sentences differently, will it eventually force you to structure your logic differently?
That's intense.
Who will you become at your very core when the private narrator of your life finally speaks a new language?
That is a wild, slightly unsettling, but incredibly exciting thought to leave on. Are you still the exact same you, or are you unlocking a completely new version of yourself?
It's a journey, for sure.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of the mind, neurobiology, and language. To the learner listening, be patient with your co-pilot, embrace the basic bricks, keep your hand on that radio dial, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.
If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend who's learning English. We'll see you tomorrow with another easy conversation. Bye, everyone!